Hi, it's Tootie Tagerly. A little afternoon Pacific time on Tuesday in my weekly live series. So I wanted to share today something that came up today and something that comes up over and over again with most of the people that I coach. And what I wanted to share is this leadership tool, which is the power of being specific. So we can get into we can get into numbness, we can get into patterns where when someone asks us, "Hey, how are you?" For many years I would say, "Oh, busy, busy, busy. How are you?" And then we would move and get into the particular thing we're talking about. Or if we see someone, just be like, "How are you feeling today?" "Ah, fine, thank you. And you?" And what really struck me this morning, because as part of the launch of my book for Make Space to Lead, I am doing a lot of meet and greets with podcast hosts because I'm going to be on a lot of podcast interviews. And what I realize is that sometimes I only have 15 minutes to get to know someone. And I found a mistake that I was falling into was really talking in platitudes and generalities, zooming to the super high level where something is not even that useful. So I'll give you some examples about how to be specific and why that really helps build connections, develop your thought leadership, and really become a very powerful leadership tool. So, the first example about being specific is to share a problem. And come on, we got lots of irritants in our life, so people have lots of problems to share. I remember one time I was coaching a head of engineering at a startup. I think they were a Series B funded startup. And he was telling me about, hey, well, a general problem I have is that I have really high expectations for these engineering leads on my team, engineering directors on my team, and they're really unable to live up to these high expectations. Okay, so that is somewhat vague, somewhat high level. It's probably a relatable problem, having high expectations of your team, but them being unable to meet it. But there's not much meat, there's not much to do with it. Instead, when you drop down several layers deep to be specific, it really helps. So the question I asked him was, all right, tell me this person's name. And I don't remember the person's name, but let's call him Jeremiah because that's the first name that comes to mind. So basically, he was saying, well, the specific problem is that Jeremiah is a fantastic engineering lead. Jeremiah, his team does good work. They always hit their targets on time. They close their bugs on time. They're very, very productive. They address the customer service and support tickets very quickly. But the individual problem is that Jeremiah has this thing where he thinks he can take care of his own problems. He thinks that he'll take care of it. He doesn't want to bother me. He is going to really handle everything himself. And he almost hides things from me. That's what my client said. So note a difference between those two scenarios. In one scenario, the very high level statement was, I'm having trouble with a particular employee who's failing to live up to some high expectations. But when you get very more specific in the context of this problem, it's like, I have an engineering director named Jeremiah. This is the stuff that he does really well. And where he's failing to meet expectations is he's not sharing when he runs into a problem with me. So by jumping into specifics, either when you're connecting with someone or jumping into the specifics of their problem, if you're a manager, asking them to go deeper into being specific, that is a powerful leadership tool to enable connection. So the first part of being specific, the first option, the first how to be specific is to share a problem. A second way to learn how to be specific is to tell a story, but to tell a story with emotion. So if you are at, let's say, a dinner party, and you're talking about something that happened, if someone says, hey, what'd you do last weekend? One story that I could say is, oh, I went to the park, spent some time outside. That's not very specific. That's really high level. That's really, vague. And that typically cuts the conversation because you actually want to dig deeper and go deeper. You know what? I'm going to switch. I'm going to switch to a different example. So this morning I was talking to someone about being on her leadership podcast, and she asked me to talk about what I wanted to share with from the book. And I was like, well, I talk to people about how they can be less busy and how they can, stop being a workaholic and get more time back in their lives. That's kind of a generality. That's like top line, super high level, but it wasn't that interesting. Instead, she asked me to go a little deeper and to tell a story with emotion. And the story that I told is one of the stories I tell from my book about one of my clients named Isadora. And the story was, well, what happened for Isadora is when the pandemic hit, she had always been a high achiever. She'd always been striving, trying to hit her gold stars, being really competitive because she worked as a leader, as an executive in Silicon Valley. And she wanted to make sure that her group, her team was in line with all the other people's teams. But something different happened when the pandemic hit. And she felt that for the first time, she was given permission to slow down and pause. Because you see, in this hyper competitive world of technology, when everyone's trying to get ahead, do more for their team, it was like, because of the pandemic, there were no more expectations. Everybody was like, what am I going to do? I'm going to stop and hide and shelter in place. What else am I going to do? So all bets were off. The slate was clean. And instead, she just felt like this sense of relief, just this incredible relief and joy that, oh my gosh, there was no more pressure. And with this place, with no more pressure, she was able to say, all right, what is it that I really care about? Okay, I need to spend time with my two kids, with my husband, and I need to spend that time to connect and relate to them. But also, without the pressure, I can actually think about, what is it that I really want to do with my job? What is it that gives me energy? What is it that enlivens me? And how do I want to move forward with this? And when we were talking about this, the story is, she's like, oh my gosh, I needed a pandemic to be able to do this. And we laughed. So the second leadership tool about being specific is tell a story. There's a protagonist, there's a beginning, a middle, and an end. In this case, Isadora, there's like some low points with the pandemic, and then there's a high point with the insight. But the bonus point is you can tell the story, but if possible, tell it with emotion to take us on the same journey with the protagonist. Tell a joke if you can. I'm not that great at being funny. I wish I were, but make people laugh. That's the second tool to help learn the power of being specific. All right, and the last tool, and if you've worked with me or watched me, you know that there's a lot about building trust by being personally vulnerable. So the third way in the power of being specific is to share your shit and be really personally vulnerable about it. So let me see. Okay, so here's an example. I'll pull that back in. I was talking to a podcast host this morning, and they were like, tell me what's going on with your book. And I'm like, all right, what the takeaways that I want people to walk away from with my book is, hey, it's okay to slow down. It's okay to not be a workaholic. It's okay not to do this. And it was me in there to them going blah, 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 blah. And I could see them turning off, and I could see them getting really, really bored. And I was like, fuck, I need to engage them. I need to connect. I need to connect in some way. And I went very, very specific. And with that, I said, well, to be honest, the reason why I wrote this book is I wanted to share that there was a time where I felt like I was failing in all aspects of my life. My marriage had fallen apart. My father-in-law had just passed away, and I'd known him since I was 18. And my father had just died. And this had been like a really hellhole year for me. But one of the things that really helped me through that, a tool, a technique, a passion that really helped me through that was surfing. Again, I'm getting to the specifics, I'm getting to a personal story, and I shared, well, what really helped me to balance out this workaholism was knowing that in surfing, there's both the being and the doing. Most people think that when you surf, oh, like that picture, you're like up on the wave, you're riding, you're going, and it's all like action and adventure. But that's not true. You're actually only up and surfing and riding a wave, maybe for, I don't know, less than 5% of the time. Like if you're out surfing for an hour, actually, no, less than like 1% of the time. If you're out surfing for an hour, you might spend 30 seconds up and riding on a wave. And I don't know how to do 30 seconds out of 60 minutes. There's like some instant math that I can't do there. But knowing that I could be out there surfing in the bobbing of the ocean, because you're spending a lot of time sitting on the board, waiting, being out in nature, looking to the horizon to see what the next set is coming, looking at, the birds around. There's some pelicans. Occasionally you might see a dolphin. Sharing that and feeling that made it okay, because that was a break from my busyness. And then I would be able to switch and be like, all right, here comes a wave. I'm going for it. And there's a paddle and there's a big kicking going into it. But until I told that story with the context of just the three big things that had happened to me and the fact that I was able to get specific into surfing as a way out for me. Oh, because surfing was the one thing where, the reality is I'm a really terrible surfer. But yet it doesn't matter because I continue to be out there doing it and showing up for it. And it's part of the process. Whew, I think I meandered a bit, but the point of it is that when you are in generalities, you don't connect with people. And to be a better leader, one leadership tool is to get very, very specific. And 3 methods of how to get specific: share a problem. People love hearing about problems and they want to, help solve it. 2, tell a story. Add emotion into it. Make them laugh if you can. Make sure there's a protagonist and you go through the journey, the emotional journey with the protagonist. And then finally, share your story. Be super personally vulnerable. And that helps with the specifics. All right, that's it for the live today about the power of being specific. If you want to learn more, my book's coming out November 2nd, makespacetolead.com. And I'll see you next Tuesday. Bye.